it's ProACT Sam. Welcome to this live webinar from Living and Working Abroad. ProACTPartnership.com is a place to follow our vlogs and blogs during the week. Now, if you can remember, the news was filled with Brexit last year in the same way that it's filled with coronavirus today. And it's almost like the media has got a very short time span. But in terms of discussing other things, the UK has left the EU. It left the EU on the 31st of January 2020, and the legislation says that it doesn't matter what happens on the 31st of December 2020, the UK leaves the EU and all its agreements. There is in a transition phase now, which runs to the end of December, and that transition phase means that nothing changes during that period. But there needs to be new trade, health, travel agreements in place before then. Now, many of them are in place, but key agreements on tariffs and trade and borders and residency are still not necessarily agreed. Therefore, one of a number of things that could happen in the 8 months that remain of this process, and one could be that there is ending up being an extension of the Brexit transition for another 3, 6, 9, 12 months. But again, that may not happen. There might be a forced, let's come together, let's just make an agreement. So instead of all the bloody-mindedness of the previous Brexit negotiations, there could be an acceptance with the new EU Commission dealing with the coronavirus to say, come on, let's not have a fight about this, let's just make an agreement that is acceptable to us both and that works. In which case we could get clarity pretty quickly on a basis, on a reciprocal basis between the UK and the EU. So there's two types of agreements that the UK can make with EU countries. It can make it with the EU as a whole and deal with it as a whole, or it can make it on a one-to-one basis. So the UK could make an individual reciprocal agreement with Belgium or Germany or Cyprus or Portugal or Spain. And those things are still all to be resolved before the end of this year. The two things that an expat needs to consider is if you're an EU expat relocating to the UK or UK expat relocated to the EU, you can still move under EU freedom of movement rules until the end of December this year. Now, your horizons might change with the Brexit, with Corona, but subject to Corona, in theory, there's no reason why you can't still relocate. Now, that might be impacted to a degree. If you're a UK expat living in the UK, you might not, you can't go back to the UK at the moment because flights from Cyprus, there's no flights in or out of the country until the middle of June. Between the 9th and 12th of June, the flights will start to be allowed again at the moment. So you can't get off the island at the moment or arrive on it. So and the UK, again, there's restrictions there. So if you're an EU expat wanting to go to the UK, it's a bit more difficult. But an EU expat can relocate to the UK by the 31st of December this year, and then live there for the rest of their life as an EU citizen would be able to. So that is in the withdrawal treaty, that is in the agreement, and that is part of the rules to the 31st of December this year. Many people's life perspectives might change on that, to live in the UK or not, or to live in the EU, or you might still want to pursue your plan, or you might defer it to next year. If you defer your relocation, if the UK expat defers his relocation to next year, or an EU expat defers his relocation till 2021, then that relocation at the moment will treat a British citizen as a non-EU citizen. Now, without getting too technical, there are countries like Switzerland and Norway and Iceland and Liechtenstein that aren't really in the EU, as are San Marino and Andorra and Vatican City, aren't really in the EU, but there's still some freedom of movement and still some flexibility with those people and working arrangements, but that doesn't exist with the UK at the moment. And those practicalities need to be put in place. So hopefully the meaning of life and the value of life will be drummed into the politicians, and the pettiness of the 3 years of Brexit hassle will be overcome, and new agreements will be made, and we'll have a clear rules on what the freedom of movement is. However, if freedom of movement becomes more restricted by Corona, then that could impact for expats. So there could be higher income requirements, higher net worth requirements that would inhibit you relocating to the country in which you prefer to move. So all those things are worthwhile considerations, but generally a UK expat needs to be in country with the residents and do their residency before the 31st of December to be able to relocate under EU rules. That's something to bear in mind.